Welcome. Hope you can hear me. Welcome to our audience filling in. I see people still coming in. Welcome to our panelists that we have today. I want to thank you for joining us for this session called the Technology and Innovation Policy for Island Sustainability. This session is being sponsored by the University of Delaware, and we are doing this in conjunction with the university's consortium of small island states. So welcome one and all. Let me introduce myself first. I am Kalim Shah. I'm a professor in the Energy and Environmental Policy program at the Biden School of Public Policy, University of Delaware. I'm also leading up with other colleagues a new island policy lab at UD, the mission of which is to aid policymakers, the private sector, civil society with data-driven, high-quality analysis of sustainability policy issues, but very specifically directed to the nuances and the specific contexts of our island jurisdictions, be it small island developing states or US territories or other. And we are aiming to do this by leveraging our expert resources here at UD, as well as the resources, experts, academics, researchers in the university consortium, where we have island-based researchers and scholars assisting us with these analyses in service of island sustainability issues. And we're using a number of different types of methods and tools in the policy space: predictive modeling, simulations, policy experiments, computational scenario planning, econometric modeling, future casting, and so on. So you'll hear a lot more about this this later on. I just wanted to introduce this new development, and also to tell you that the University of Delaware, with the Island Policy Lab as the focal point, has recently been designated as the coordinator of the university's consortium of small island states, the USSIS. This is a United Nations multi-stakeholder partnership that was formed to address island-specific development issues aligned with the Samoa Pathway. So a lot of exciting things happening there, and I just wanted to update all of us who are interested in these topics. But today we have a wonderful panel of experts here with us, where we will be talking about speeding up and scaling up research and technology and innovation for island contexts. As we know, small island states have been highlighted as very vulnerable to extreme weather events. Oftentimes, our islands are economically limited, not very diversified economies. We have fragile ecosystems. Many times we're highly indebted and often energy insecure. But even with these challenges, we do also acknowledge that islands have unique features and characteristics that could be leveraged as strengths. And the idea here is to leverage these strengths, but we have to be very creative in how we do that. So, in that context of dealing with these very urgent challenges and also leveraging some of the unique characteristics that islands have, we have this session here today to look at the role of technology in all of this, and research and innovation, really to the ends of sort of strengthening our economies, strengthening our society, adding value, but doing these things in clean, sustainable ways that, at the end of the day, result in magnified, very impactful effects, positive effects on society, that is sustainable and long-standing. So really building that long-term sustainability capacity. And we focus here today with our speakers on the role that universities, research institutions, and the scholars and researchers that do work within these institutions, how they play a role in these sustainable island transitions. So today what we'll do, our session is broken up into two pieces, two parts. First, we'll hear from a couple of speakers who are researchers and innovators working with and in universities, and how they navigate that technology innovation space. And we'll have a pause for questions and answers. Then we move to the second part with our panelists who are at the intersect of the policy realm and the technology realm, to give us some insights on their views on when they're working in islands, what the policy and the operating environment looks like, and how they navigate technology adaptation, diffusion, and generating real results for people. So we have a very multi-dimensional set of speakers to get multiple perspectives. Now, to set us off on a right footing, so to speak, as we start, and to provide some real contextual perspective for today's discussion, and to give an opening message, I want to invite first His Excellency Ambassador Anton Edmonds to make a statement. Now, Anton is the ambassador of St. Lucia to the United States. He is also the permanent representative of St. Lucia to the Organization of American States, St. Lucia's non-resident High Commissioner to Canada, and non-resident ambassador to Mexico. And what is also very interesting about Anton is that before his diplomatic appointment, he spent many, many years working very closely with the private sector and industry, especially governments, businesses, and trade associations interested in the Caribbean basin. And he's worked on energy security issues, maritime security, financial services, tourism, and a number of other areas. He's also a senior associate with the CSIS in Washington, D.C., the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and chair of the State Department's Caribbean program at the Foreign Service Institute. So let me hand it over to Ambassador Edmonds for his opening statement. Anton?
Thank you, Kalim. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. First, I thought I'd made a wrong turn, because with all of the scientists in the house, I realized that you know very well that that's not my space. Let me just sort of, I've been advised that I always need to do this to preface that the remarks are my own. Obviously not scientific, and obviously don't necessarily reflect the government of St. Lucia. So here's my disclaimer. I think it's clear for all that for small island developing states like everywhere else, the nexus where we see success is where policy, technology, and innovation align. This is, however, in my view, easier said than done. As while for small countries committed to sustainable development, it would seem like a no-brainer that we would be the ideal place for this sort of mashup to show results. We are often not. Size, as you referenced, sophistication, lack of policy coherence, and limited access to finance, and quite frankly, fear, are all factors that oftentimes mitigate against the success that I think we should see and that we need to see in small islands. You referenced the energy space. In that area, throughout my professional career, there have been these discussions of the need for countries to diversify, to embrace technology that could be less damaging environmentally, and obviously to lower costs. Who wouldn't want to do that? Policymakers in the region, in the Caribbean especially, when pressed, always speak positively on this issue, notably on the continued dependence on fossil fuels. But at the end of the day, actual implementation has been slow. while the deciding factors ended up being a mix of the following questions. How am I going to pay for it? Notably, when we're talking about highly indebted countries, funding in certain instances, the investment themselves. How am I going to delink my country from a contractual arrangement with a party who has either generation or distribution monopoly? And why should I do it? Why should I be the one location within my region to embrace innovation, to embrace change when others are not doing it as well? Now, I want to be clear that on the energy issue, while it has been easy to knock embedded providers of power, that's not my intention. In fact, I believe that what we're seeing is that this group, which was once considered an impediment to innovation and technology deployment, they're actually the ones in many instances embracing the same. They're the ones at times integrating solar and wind into the mix and deploying technologies that track outages in real time, also billing, new billing technologies. In fact, more often than not, what we're finding in small island developing states, it is the regulatory framework of government that is increasingly becoming the impediment to advancements and innovation in the energy space. Fundamentally, on the implementation and on the deployment front, what we have to embrace, I believe, and seek to address is the fact that we need to expose innovation and technology to more than just the policymaker. The tendency has always been to focus on the minister, to focus on a couple of technology savvy folks within countries. My belief is that we need to equally and aggressively sell innovation to the banker. You mentioned the issue about financing. Unless the expectation is that we're going to finance innovation and the deployment of innovation by development banks and by donors, we have to get the private sector banking community involved. We have to get the insurance companies involved. They have to be able to measure risk as well as reward as it relates to the deployment of these technologies in the societies where they operate. And most importantly, probably one of the most forgotten constituents is the population, the populace. That's the majority stakeholder in every society. You dig beyond the policymaker and you get to the people who this is supposed to benefit. Beyond energy, one of the more intriguing things for me today when you look at innovation and technology is that, for example, in this COVID-19 environment today, many of us see the need and the opportunity for technology innovation in food production. We see the need to cut the import bill, and policymakers themselves are being encouraged to look at technologies which would increase yield and diversify products for local consumption. They have to. You can't continue to import products externally from the outside when there's no revenue coming in. Fundamentally, for small countries, an import food bill that is 20, 30, 40% of expenditures is obscene in my view once again. This especially if you have arable land and key inputs such as labor that you can match with innovative solutions. Beyond agriculture, we have banking technology, innovation in governing through the digitization of government systems. These are all areas where citizens can expect more and should see more. The resulting efficiencies, opportunities for entrepreneurship are all outcomes that I think we can all agree exist. Interestingly enough, we're seeing technology growth, especially in the Caribbean, in the offshoring of services and resulting employment. Yet sadly, we're also losing many of our own entrepreneurs who are not being enabled and who at times are quite frankly being denied the policy positive inputs that would allow them to stay home and excel. Of note, I lament the fact that there are many a technology visionary who has failed in his or her own space in small locations like the Caribbean, and then has left and then has achieved the success on the outside. My biggest concern, especially in the environment where we are today, notably the COVID-19 environment, is that while this offers us an opportunity to embrace innovation and make policy changes that buoy technology deployment, the markets will stabilize. Of course, I'm not against a vaccine and the stabilization of the markets, but a vaccine Growth, stabilization of industries like tourism in the case of my country will allow us to revert to what we are comfortable with and may very well serve to tamp down the innovation that we should be embracing right now. A harsh reality also is that the current economic downturn will result in less capital in an environment where capital was already limited. I want to close with just a couple quick points. I want to restate that policymakers, especially in island settings, need to be presented with proven technologies and innovation. It's not that you can't test unproven technologies in the region. Of course you can, but proven technologies and innovations that have worked elsewhere stand the best chance to be deployed and embraced within these small markets. Policymakers also need to be presented with financing options that lower government exposure and risk. As you pointed out, you're talking about countries that are highly indebted, and their ability to take on the risk is very, very limited. And ultimately, we also, I believe, which I referenced before, we need to bring the pressure of advocacy by and from populations in countries into the mix. My view is that an area where maybe the lab doesn't quite necessarily fit into that space, or maybe universities don't quite fit into that space, but support for civil society engagement could very well be the key as it relates to democratizing access to information on technology and innovation that islands could and should consider. Getting that information, that data out to the population, educating them as to what should be done on their behalf is probably one of the key missing links that we often overlook. Policymakers also need to embrace policy decisions that are in train or that have been developed by their predecessors. A level of maturity is something that we very much need in small islands and in developing countries. The desire to toss out innovation because it was embraced by a prior policymaker is probably one of the worst things that could happen as it relates to its deployment. Fundamentally, what we may need are repositories of data that remain after the policymaker is voted out, or maybe they survive into a second or a third term. A repository of data that highlights successes in technology deployment and that makes the investment less scary. Data that is public versus data that takes its space on a shelf in a ministry. And data that is regularly updated so it can continually inform what is usually a slow process. You mentioned that island labs, in many instances, a public and maybe universally based system could be the solution, through which donors and governments agree to posit their studies so that they are accessible. A system that equally links the solution sets to the problem areas and opportunities identified. Considering how rapidly technology advances, a system that tracks technology and innovations, continually giving policymakers the most up-to-date metrics and solutions could undoubtedly be of significant value. On that note, I want to close and thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Edmonds. A lot of points of food for thought there, but perhaps I could take 1 minute to, looking at some of the questions on the chat here, ask if you were to prioritize the needs in the Caribbean right now in terms of development and where we see technology standing right now, where might you say researchers and universities should focus their research and needs?
Well, I mean, writ large, I would say standards. I mean, I use the word standards very, very generally, but one of the issues that we do have is that in as much as we have a regional entity that's engaged in standards, the ability to have the research backing that up, to be able to and also to transfer research from one country to the next best practices from the South Pacific into the Caribbean, for example. That basically ends up addressing issues like housing. It ends up addressing issues like energy. It ends up maybe addressing issues like health. You know, standards writ large. It may sound glib, but standards and really and truly across the board, getting a uniform system in place where research is fed into the system in real time would be the place to start.
Wonderful, thank you, Ambassador. That echoes some of my own research teams' work in the Caribbean as well, where we looked at policy approaches to transitioning to very simple technologies like LEDs and CFLs for lighting, and also on the issues of the single-use plastics. And what we find is that the research would suggest that in different even small island Caribbean jurisdictions, even within that one grouping, there are many different optimal approaches to the kind of policy approach you would need to transition to energy efficient light bulbs or do away with single-use plastics. And obviously it gets a little bit more complicated than that as we move to more advanced kinds of technologies, all right? So thank you very much. And with that, let's move on to our first panel of the researchers and innovators that actually work in this space. And we will start with Professor Laura Hosman from the Arizona State University. She is an associate professor holding a joint appointment in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society and the Polytechnic School. Her action-oriented work focuses on the role of new technologies in developing countries, particularly in education. She is the co-founder and director of Solar Spell, Solar-Powered Educational Learning Library. And she will be talking to us about that and some of the other initiatives. So with that, I hand it over to Professor Hosman.
Kalim, thank you so much. And I would actually like to start my presentation with a video.
If you're watching this video, you're connected to the internet. But did you know that over half the world's population has never connected to the internet? That over 90% of schools across the developing world don't have internet access? That's not okay with us. We believe education is a human right and that access to quality information is essential for quality education. That's why, with the help of their students, our co-founders designed a solar-powered digital library. The Solar Spell digital library allows learners to connect to a server using smartphones, tablets, and laptops to freely surf the thousands of open access resources. It's portable enough to fit in your backpack and rugged enough to withstand heat, humidity, dirt, and rain. Use of the Solar Spell libraries requires no internet, no electricity, and no data, yet connects curious minds to a world of information. It looks and feels like you're online, so students can develop information literacy and digital skills even without the internet. Most importantly, we curate localized content so that teachers and students can see themselves in the books and videos on the library. To ensure we have a lasting impact, we maintain close relationships with our communities. For each location, we establish in-field partnerships with local organizations. Our train-the-trainer model empowers local teachers through on-site workshops to return to their communities with the skills and knowledge necessary to sustainably implement this technology. We continuously improve our libraries as community needs are always evolving. Solar Spell provides learners with the knowledge to address the challenges they face. In 3 years, we have brought over 300 solar spells to 8 countries around the world. In 3 more years, imagine what impact we can achieve by providing solar spell libraries to small-scale farmers improving their crop yields, entrepreneurs bringing their ideas to the market, or refugees starting their next chapter. Libraries can address any topic, any need. The possibilities are endless. The digital divide is currently leaving behind entire generations of learners, but we don't have to wait for the internet and electricity to reach these communities. Solar Spell is already addressing this challenge. We hope you'll join us today as we increase access to quality education around the world.
Okay, Taylor, thank you for showing that video. And I want to confirm everyone can see me on the presentation or hear me and see the presentation.
Yeah, perfectly, Laura.
Super, great. So as you heard, the Solar Spell is a solar-powered educational learning library designed for teaching internet-ready skills like information literacy to the half of the world's population that's currently unconnected. And I wanted to target schools where that percentage of unconnectedness is actually much higher. The Solar Spell contains an open access, localized digital library, and it is targeted primarily at primary and secondary schools. I also wanted to start working in the Pacific Islands because the infrastructural challenges I felt are the greatest there. They're really the most remote and at the forefront, as many islands are, of living with the effects of climate change. So I felt that it was extremely frustrating that those who stand to benefit so significantly from being connected and having access to information are among the least likely to be connected and have that access. I also felt that if we could prove the concept of bringing a solar-powered offline digital library and teaching internet-ready skills in the Pacific, then we could do it anywhere because of those infrastructural challenges. But my priority still remains islands because of these unique infrastructural challenges. The Solar Spell's brain, if you will, the computer, is a Raspberry Pi microcomputer, and it emits an offline Wi-Fi hotspot. I can hold one up here for a real in-person demo. You can see it's blinking right now. The computer emits a Wi-Fi hotspot. It's offline, so only in my room could you access it right now, but it looks and feels like you're online. You connect to a website, and because you remain safely offline, internet-ready skills can be built in a safe, kid-friendly, or if I can say novice internet user-friendly environment, so that once the internet does reach people, they are able to use it in a savvy, empowered way. I also want to mention that in every aspect of the Solar Spell initiative, I involve my university students at ASU. The video you just watched was created by a student, for example. They also code, curate, create. Any given semester, I have about 60 to 70 students meaningfully involved with the Solar Spell initiative. And speaking of localization, I'd like to give an example from Fiji. But first, I wanted to mention we've been working with the Peace Corps and its volunteers since 2015, following a train-the-trainer model. So when we go to the field and carry out a training, it has involved a Peace Corps volunteer and the local teacher with whom they're paired for 2 years. And I'm happy to say that we've just signed a global strategic partnership with the Peace Corps, and this is the first time, so they've told us that the impetus for a global strategic partnership has actually bubbled up from the field, from the posts around the world to headquarters. So that just became a reality in July. But back to the example from Fiji. So 3 years ago, the Fiji Peace Corps country director contacted us at Solar Spell, having heard of us through word of mouth, to ask when we could come to Fiji. So I asked him, what are your specific content needs for Fiji, which is something that we do every time we go to a new location. We always develop version 1 of the library before we go. And then once we're in field and people have version 1 in their hands, then we ask them, help us improve this so that it's even more relevant, even more useful for you. So we wanted to know what we should bring on version 1. And his response, climate change content, hands down. So the Peace Corps volunteers who worked in Fiji and the communities in which they are working are already being affected by climate change. They know this, but they don't necessarily know what to do about it. So that became our challenge. That was the content that we looked for. We were introduced to the Ministry of Education, or to people at the Ministry of Education in Fiji, And we started pairing ASU Teachers College students with folks in the Fiji's Ministry of Education to start working on preparing teacher lesson plans that not only teach about climate change, but link to multiple resources within the library so that they can be audio-visual, hands-on, action-oriented, real-world, and localized supplemental materials for the teachers, in addition to the textbooks, that can make this content really come to life, become more engaging and more instructive for the students using it. So I'm happy to say 2 faculty members from Tec de Monterrey in Mexico who specialize in educational technology and I traveled to Fiji in February, all the way back when we could still travel, and carried out in-field impact evaluation research on use of the solar spell in 7 Fijian schools that have been using the solar spell libraries for the past 6 months. And I've loaded the Open Access Sustainability Journal article that we published a few weeks ago. It's hot off the press, literally, to the files folder within this panel's website. So I invite you to read it, but I can indicate that we were very happy to report on the usage of the solar spell to provide climate change content in the form of lesson plans to the teachers, and it was being widely used, but also having access to all of this supplementary information that this offline digital library can provide was proving very useful to the teachers and students. So that's the end of my presentation. I invite you to read the paper and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Professor Hosman. And we will keep going, and at the end of this part of the panel, we will take some Q&A. All right, so let's move on to our second researcher, university researcher today, and we will be getting a presentation from my own colleague here at UDEL, Professor Arthur Trambanis. So Art is the director of our Coastal Sediments, Hydrodynamics and Engineering Lab. That's Seashell for short. So you get it, right? Seashell is very nice, Art. But the work of Seashell involves the development and utilization of advanced oceanographic instrumentation, particularly autonomous underwater vehicles, for seafloor mapping and benthic habitat characterization. Professor Trambanis has a bachelor's degree in geology. He's a Fulbright fellow, spending some time at the University of Sydney, and he has a PhD in marine sciences. And I can absolutely say that Dr. Trambanis is someone who has probably traveled to almost any island anywhere that you can think of. But please take it away, Professor Trambanis.
Thank you, Kalim, for that kind introduction, and thank you for organizing this session, and for all the folks who've been helping make this possible. And I want to thank you all for joining and attending here. And I think we're living in a very exciting age of autonomous systems and machine learning. And I want to, I'm a coastal geologist and physical oceanographer who's always been a tinkerer. And we're living in an exciting time for technologies like what you just heard from Professor Hosman, where Raspberry Pi devices and a number of different autonomous systems and sensors are democratizing, have the capacity, have the potential to democratize innovations and the applications of these technologies in the service of sustainable development. And for me, as an environmental scientist, it starts with first being able to have a map. And to manage any natural resources, the first thing you have to have is some map and some way of knowing the extent and remembering that every map has a use by date. And just like a carton of milk, and some cartons of milk and some maps spoil quicker than others because of the dynamics of those systems. And so I think this is an exciting time, and I'm going to show you, highlight for you some examples of where new and emerging technologies have been put to work, and I hope can have some applicability to other settings as well. So we can go to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So there's really, this is admittedly a busy slide. I just want you to take away that there are many things that come together in these efforts, and it comes down to platforms, which really are the pickup trucks or the taxi cabs of sensors, and then those get bundled together through data intelligence. And I think there are exciting innovations in each of those sectors, and for us they come on the backs of partnerships. And for us, those partnerships are public and private. They intersect from research universities into agencies, into public commercial groups as well. And while there's a whole host of very high-tech systems that we use in our work, that's one of the hallmarks and challenges of particularly of ocean exploration, I think really what is very exciting right now is that there is a real proliferation of what I'd call high-tech, low-cost, or low-cost high-tech systems that can provide these enabling platforms, enabling sensors, and enabling data intelligence that can really, all together help us have a better sense of our environment and precious and dynamic resources within them. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll give you some examples of that. For instance, pull the next slide, please. We started several years ago trying to utilize autonomous underwater vehicles, small, uncrewed mini submarines, to be able to supplement divers and other traditional techniques for trying to sample in the deeper parts of particularly of coral reef setting areas, these areas known as mesophotic reef systems. So they're beyond the depths that the traditional scuba diving can get to, and yet they're a critical resource. They're critical to helping shallower reefs recover. They're critical for considering impacts from spills or storms or other damages. And in Bonaire and in Bermuda, we utilized AUVs to be able to get down and provide us eyes and ears into these environments. And it allows us to extend both the depth of our reach, the expanse of our reach, and the resolution at which we can quantify and document and characterize these important and largely unexplored coral reef settings. And then that allows us to then use GIS techniques, remote sensing techniques, to be able to find out which are the areas which we need to explore further, which are areas that we may need to consider setting aside for marine protected areas, which are areas that we could otherwise consider for various development applications. And sometimes in the course of doing that, we can make some unexpected discoveries. For instance, last year we were in Bermuda running a mission in some deep waters, and lo and behold, we looked back at our photos and we found what was clearly a shell, an unexploded ordnance shell there. Next slide, please. Our concern for the kinds of impacts that can happen from unexploded or exploded ordnance, of course, is still only really being able to, we're still only just starting to get a handle on that. And that was made very clear to me and my team when we were invited last year to go out to Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands and conduct the first comprehensive survey of the area that was used for the testing in the 40s and 50s in 1946, when Operation Crossroads was undergone. And we could see still 75 years later, we could still see the impacts from the atomic bomb testing and the dozen shipwrecks lying and deteriorating on the lagoon floor, emblematic of so many other sites throughout the Pacific and the Atlantic. And we could see evidence of, and now quantify the conditions of these wrecks and see the ones that were leaking oil and that are filled with different munitions, and start to be able to document the conditions of the reefs and provide the sort of baseline mapping. And we did that using very agile, very portable technology, very achievable. Even for us, we were operating on a small little 18-foot aluminum boat, not coming in with big research vessels. If you could, I think, click on the slide, please. Yeah, we used just a small little vessel of opportunity that we could bring, portable sensors with. And so sometimes it's the sensor and we utilize, just whatever platform we get our hands on. Other times we're developing the full sensors as well, and using those to pull together our intelligence of the environment. Next slide, please. But closer to home, I think one of the things that's been very exciting is seeing how we can turn to the consumer market and utilize very low cost, high technology. And here we're using a consumer grade side scan sonar systems. These are consumer, there's a whole array of these that are built and designed for recreational boaters to be able to have, not just to chart where they are, but now you can have sonar systems that rival some of the most sophisticated professional survey grade sonars, and we can use those. And we've been using those recently because we can enlist other boaters, we can enlist the citizenry to have community science, and use these sonar systems in this case to tackle the problem of marine debris. In our local waters, it's derelict fishing gear from crab pots that sometimes outnumber by an order of magnitude the real pots, and that continue to form a hazard to navigation and impact the environment. And so we can use these low-tech consumer grade systems to gather the data and train people to process them and be able to find the targets. And in fact, we're training computers to be able to find these targets as well. And all of that leads to capacity building. While we're looking for and finding marine debris, we're also mapping critical habitats and allowing us to know where are these different habitats spatially that we've otherwise never seen before. Next slide, please. And it's not just, it's that the data collecting is not where everything ends. That's really where the story sort of starts. And for instance, we can utilize our AUV systems to capture photos of the seafloor, and then find ourselves suddenly burdened with hundreds of thousands of images that it's almost impossible to go through all of them. So that's where we've turned to. Now, once we have our data, it becomes that data, the deep learning side of things, where there's a number of open source enabling technologies out there that can be used to now enable our ability to process through large amounts of data. Systems that exist in the cloud that are open source, that can be ported to small electronic devices that can be utilized from drop cameras or diver-based photos, and that really rely on humans to annotate those images to train the artificial intelligence to be able to go through our images. Next slide, please. And it's in the same way that the consumer sonar systems help us to address marine debris, we can use consumer drone systems to help us to provide and explore our critical intertidal areas, not just mapping the shape of the beach, but we can also use them to get a characterization of important and critical intertidal and subtidal flora and fauna. In this case, we're looking at what are known as the coral beds of Delaware, these very delicate worm-built reefs. So, and last slide, please. I just want to say that what we do is we find ourselves in this very happy place. Maybe it's some ways sort of too happy, and we're like this little girl here on a hot summer day, drinking from a fire hose of data brought to us, enabled by autonomous systems, by advanced and hopefully low-cost sensors, and that we try to make sense of using AI and deep learning, whether it's in the service of trying to address and locate sand resources for building, or characterizing critical deep corals, or inventorying important sponges that might have valuable medical usage to us, or managing fisheries and other marine resources. We're living in this exciting time where the juxtaposition of these is going on, and I think it's in a way that is going to be very portable and deployable in many islands around the world. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Trambanis. And again, lots of questions appearing on the chat we will deal with shortly. Our third and last speaker for this part of the session is Mr. David Ramjohn, actually a fellow Trinidadian, if I might say, but he's here not just because he's Trinidadian, but he is the Chief Executive Officer of Algae Eternal, and he's also the Global Head of Sustainability for Kind Earth Tech. David was originally trained as a marine biologist. He has 25 years in the broad field of sustainable development, where he has worked both as a regulator and on the industry side. He has his academic background also includes work in environmental studies and law and policy. In his role as the CEO and founder of Algae Eternal, he looks at, they are a vertical integrated producer of algae-based products, leveraging patented algae growth technology. He is the recipient of numerous recent awards from the US algae industry. He sits on the Algae Biomass Organization Board of Directors. He's also on the Technical Advisory Board for their Center of Excellence. And he is also working very closely with the University of Houston College of Technology, where he is on the Industry Advisory Board and also works closely with the researchers there at the University of Houston in his development of his products. His facilities are located in LaGrange, Texas, and he was recently actually awarded Most Valued Citizen Award in LaGrange, Texas by the Chamber of Commerce for his contributions to the innovation field. So with that, I will put you over to Mr. David Ramjohn. David?
All right, thank you very much, Kalim. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, good. Let's see. Is any audio coming through?
Hi, David. Yes, we can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hold on.
Hi, David. Apologies. The audio from the video doesn't seem to be coming through now.
I'm trying to figure out why. There's always a technical glitch, isn't there? Let me see if I can switch back over here. Whoa. All right. I think that may have been the problem. Let's see.
No, unfortunately not.
Oh,
No. Did you tick the share audio button when you shared screen?
hang on.
David, perhaps you can remove your earphones or disconnect your headphones. That might help.
All right.
And then share again.
James, do you have me?
Yeah, we can hear you. If you want to try and share again, and then we'll go.
All right, let's try this again. James, am I here?
Yeah, we can hear you. If you want to try and share, let's go for it again.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see what's going on here with this now.
Is the video playing?
It's playing on my end, but clearly
No.
not playing there. So hang on.
Unfortunately, it's not. Unless you want to go ahead and talk instead.
Yeah, I'll try that. Get this open here.
Perhaps David, we can come back to you and go to the next speaker.
Sure.
And you can try and give it one last go, but or do you just want to go straight into your presentation? We can see your presentation now.
You can see it now?
Yeah, if you want to go to the first slide and click present, then you can take it away. Sorry about the video issues, but great, we can see that, so go ahead.
All right. Are you hearing anything?
No sound, but perhaps you can just talk us through the slides instead.
Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. Sorry about the issues there. Thank you to the organizers of this summit for the invitation to present. It's an honor to share with you my perspectives on the most important microbes on Earth, microalgae.
Everything's fine. You can continue. You're on slide 3 now.
You hearing the voiceover?
No, there's no voiceover coming through, unfortunately. So we'll have to skip that. If you want to go ahead and talk through them, I think that's best.
Okay, good. So I'll start here. Being the disruptor that I am, I signal my intent to go beyond sustainability. We are caught in a linear economy, even though we have been flirting with ideas of a green economy, sustainable development, and more recently, the circular economy. Researchers and practitioners of sustainable development and circular economic theory have now accepted that the next step must be regenerative. We must go beyond doing no harm to doing as nature does. This metric, Earth Overshoot Day, puts our predicament into perspective. This is the date on which we exceed the planet's biocapacity to replenish the resources we consume in the year of concern. After that date, we are drawing down on savings accumulated pre-industrial revolution, or we are using up biocapacity credit, which will be paid for by future generations. So let's talk innovation, which relies on research and development. Note that small island states spend on average less than 1% of their GDP on R&D. Countries that spend well above that percentage are accepted as the leaders in innovation. As an absolute rather than a relative figure, the scale of R&D spent by the major players dwarfs all other participants. R&D must increase in island economies if we are to innovate sustainably. Now to my preferred solution, algae. Take my word for it. Without algae, we would not be here, we could not stay here, and we will not be happy here. They are the literal founders of the feast for carbon-based aerobic life forms on Earth. They created the environmental conditions, resources, and they can recalibrate and regenerate those resources. For AlgaeTernal, this is our secret weapon. It's patented bioreactors that we call vertical growth modules that allow us to overcome one of the major obstacles to successful algae industry, that is growing microalgae at commodity scale. Algae industry technology covers the gamut of biotechnology applications, from biology, chemistry, biochemistry, genetics, food technology, pharmacology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, agronomy, farming, robotics, you name it. You can find it in the algae industry. And being the primary producers, converting sunlight into glucose, which is a basic building block of all carbon molecules, there is very little that they cannot make. Whatever you can make from fossil hydrocarbons, you can make from algae. The only difference between fossil hydrocarbons and living algae is time, temperature, and pressure. These are just a few of the known products and values possible from algae biomass, and this doesn't valorize the ecosystem services they can provide, such as wastewater treatment, carbon capture and use, reversal of global warming, and biogeochemical cycling. This preliminary landscape maps industry participants along the value chain in different market verticals. There are 67 on this version of the map, and we anticipate hundreds soon. No company is an island. We build partnerships with academia and industry. We partner with Texas A&M for independent product field trials, University of Houston for mentoring students and for research into novel biomaterials, University of Texas at Austin for algae seed cultures and student internships, Rice University for scientific advice and independent trials, ASCATI for professional training, and Florida AMU for private-public partnerships to solve real-world problems. Industrial partnerships with technology and professional service providers support our strategic goals. George Fisher for special tubing used in our vertical growth modules, Origin Clear for our harvesting technology, and LCE Labs who formulate our skincare line using our algal extract. We currently have 2 products in the market, Elixir Soil Amendment and the Algaleo Skincare Collection, both of which consistently receive excellent reviews. I'll spend the least time on this slide. I've somehow managed to achieve a lot outside of Trinidad and Tobago, but I do intend to use my skills to benefit Trinidad and Tobago and other small island states. But here's what governments need to do: facilitate entrepreneurship, stimulate and incentivize private sector engagement and investment, level the playing field, fund innovative applications in research, development, demonstration, and deployment, recognize algae's ability to fix the problems, and most importantly, don't politicize environmental issues. Academia has a role to play. They have to develop the curricula that are relevant to the jobs in the industry, collaborate with businesses on critical areas of research, actively promote public-private partnerships with industry, establish industry advisory boards, and get technical majors to take basic entrepreneurship courses. It's not all about science. You've got to know business. And of course, educate, educate, educate. These are my recommended reading for the curious, and I thank you for your attention. Okay, did that go through well or no?
Yes, yes, we got all of it, David. Sorry, the video did not work. We can try to circle around to that or get that material to our audience later on. We can share that through the through James's platform. Okay. But thank you so much. So now we will take a pause for some questions from the audience, and I have harvested some of the main ones. And if I may, I'd like to go to our first speaker on the panel, Professor Hosman. And so, Laura, there were a couple of inquiries about, and I'll say two at the same time. One is on your thoughts on updating content moving forward. How is that done? How is that envisioned? Especially with an eye to locally produced content, local tailored content for the particular island context, be it Fiji or anywhere else. And second is, have you had any experiences that you would like to share about user acceptance of actually when you take the devices to schools and so on, what has user acceptance been like? Have you learned anything that has helped you to adjust your approach through looking at user acceptance? So kind of twofold question.
Great, thank you. So I'm also going to use show and tell again to answer that first question, which was about updating. So at this point, because we're presuming a situation of no connectivity, how we update the content on the library is just switching out the micro SD card that holds all of the content on the library. So the micro SD card is quite tiny, it's small, you can almost barely see it, it's the size of a fingernail. And that's it. In order to update it, it just gets switched out and a new one is put in. So we call it SneakerNet because it's a physical way of going out to all of the remote places. We're very aware that updating could take place over the internet, but because we don't want to further penalize the places that are not online, because it's a logistical huge task to figure out who's going to pay for the data, et cetera, we've decided to keep the schools safe and offline, and for the moment, that's how we're updating things. So we update the libraries once a year with new SD cards. Oh goodness, the second question. Kalim, could you remind me? I'm so sorry.
Okay. We were asking about user
experience. Yes, thank you. So in fact, SolarSpell is not my first endeavor to try to bring technology to schools and figure out what would work and what wouldn't. what I actually want to share came before Solar Spell and informed why we have made a whole lot of the decisions that we've made about Solar Spell, including not connecting schools to the internet, because the minute that that happens and you have a lot of inexperienced internet users, we find viruses, we find age inappropriate content getting onto the libraries, etc. So for example, that's one reason that we've decided to remain offline. Another decision that we've made based on experience of going to the field is not to have any passwords. So it is just as simple as connecting one's smartphone, tablet, laptop, any device to the Solar Spell, and it just works every time, and it's just a website, and there are no passwords for first-time users to forget, if you will. So we've kept everything open access. We've standardized on MP4 videos, PDF files, because presuming a situation of no connectivity, we also need to have that users are not expected to download something because they won't have internet access. So these are all lessons that we learned before we developed the Solar Spell, and they went into informing the decisions that we made in developing it. I would say that we have had good uptake. Again, I could point attendees to the paper that's in the files section of this panel.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. We'll pose a question, so more of a comment really to Professor Trambanis. So one of the things that struck me from your talk, as always, Art, and linking back to something that Ambassador Edmonds was saying about having technology and innovation sort of spoken in and presented in the language of the private sector, bankers and the insurance industry and so on. One of the things that struck me is perhaps with your underwater seafloor mapping technology and so on. There could be a link to looking at damages, for example, damages to coral reefs that have some eco-service value, and linking that to insurance, the insurance industry, and payouts and valuation. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one. And also, in the past, when I've spoken about your technology with others, it has always come up that with local community groups, for example, in the islands, where they say, you know, we suspect that there may be some local deterioration in our offshore environment because there was some company doing some exploration there, for example. But we don't have a means to verify this on our own. But I see that your technology, and coming from a university, sort of a third party, kind of neutral kind of position, that can definitely help some of these kinds of questions that local communities might have. So again, sort of two things there, if you could comment.
Sure, thanks, Kalim. That's so the issue of using some of these technologies to establish damages and impacts to the environment is definitely, you know, something that's informed a lot of the work that I do and that others in my field, and this very much was in our was in our minds, and a number of discussions that colleagues and I were having recently. From, you know, we've seen the terrible news in Mauritius of the oil spill there. Even in the States, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico, when we suffered the Deep Horizon oil spill, you know, part of the reports that went into it afterwards. One of the great difficulties we had is not having a baseline from which to establish damages, because damages is just that. It's got to be referenced to some baseline. And so what I think in many places is needed is that baseline, so that we can start to establish, you know, what is there to be damaged, to be preserved, and then be able to follow up and then look at those impacts. Because I know that was one of the things that made it difficult in the Gulf from the BP oil spill, was not having baseline, particularly in some of those deeper areas. So, you know, and for us, that's guided a lot of the work we do in trying to do rapid response. I think one of the great things about a lot of these technologies, drone systems that, you know, are you know, consumer grade. You can get a hold of them, and hobbyists can use them. Can be used to get baseline ahead of a storm coming through. So maybe it can be very difficult for us to mobilize a scientific survey team ahead of a hurricane and get to outlying islands. Whereas if we can enable these technologies with small open source drones, small open source ROVs that are low cost but can be used very effectively once we have some knowledge of the approaches that need to be taken in planning, executing, and then archiving data, then we can work in the cloud together to be able to process data and provide information back without even having to get there. I mean, this has been one of the things that we've really been trying to think about, particularly this year in the age of COVID, is how can we enable some of these surveys using local groups, using community science, and that gets to the value and the importance that the local constituencies have in this, because they are the front lines. They know these environments. They have the most at stake. And so, you know, for us, it's always important whenever we're going and trying to do some projects to try to have outreach events, try to enable recruiting opportunities and training opportunities, so that the techniques and the skills and approaches we use can be employed, you know, can be distributed into these other communities. And something that David brought up, you know, to the training of entrepreneurial intelligence to students is something that I think the modern universities we're very much, you know, having to you know, trying to wrestle with and trying to develop. So we have a new program in eco-entrepreneurship. We have a new program in Masters of Robotics, and I think that is where we see some of the most exciting opportunities for our students. And when I can bring in industry problems and connections, when I can bring in real world challenges to our students and then put them in the position of thinking of ways to innovate and thinking of ways they can take their approaches and their ideas to market, that's really a better proposition, because there's not going to be a lot of opportunities so much for them necessarily in academia. And a lot of them don't want to go in academia, and there's times where I can't blame them. So anyways, I hope hopefully that covered the question you had.
Yes, thank you very much, Art. So, David, I wanted to ask one question, because, you know, we've known each other for a while, and I think Art touches on it as well. But again, it harkens back to something that Ambassador Edmonds mentioned earlier, and basically, to paraphrase, his concern about brain drain. And you are, you know, for want of a better term, maybe a brain drainee, right, from the islands. But I don't know if you can speak very, very, very shortly, you know, just take a minute or two to tell us about that experience and what your advice might be for reducing brain drain from islands.
Wow, that's a really interesting question, Kalim. Unfortunately for me, almost all of my opportunities have come from outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Just put it that way. I started off my career in fisheries research, and began to become known for my ability as you know, fish taxonomist, systematist, classification, that kind of thing. Never went to school for it, taught myself the skill, became so good at it that I served as a state expert witness in taxonomy and identification of fishes in court cases against vessels that were found fishing illegally in Trinidad and Tobago. And although I had the skill, I was, you know, denied on several opportunities to go and get scholarships that were offered for persons working in fisheries and were supposed to come back to fisheries. So that, you know, that was my experience for quite some time. I was working for 14 years in fisheries, had published 2 books on the fishes of Trinidad and Tobago. You might be able to see behind me, there's a poster on Trinidad and Tobago marine fishes that I did. all without a degree, mind you, and all after having been denied several times the opportunity from the government to get scholarships to go and do this. I eventually got an offer from a researcher at the College of Charleston in South Carolina. He had found money and he offered me an assistantship after meeting me and seeing the work that I was doing. And that's how I got out of it. I went back to Trinidad after getting my degree in marine biology and served in the Environmental Management Authority for quite some time. Again, grew to occupy a senior position within that agency. But it never really came through for me that I got the opportunities where I wanted them in Trinidad. I always want to go back to Trinidad and do the work. I eventually tried to do the algae technology in Trinidad, got approved for a loan of $10 million from Exim Bank, and the company I was with couldn't secure the loan. So that went a begging. I approached several large companies in Trinidad to do it, and nobody understood it. Nobody saw the value in it, so it didn't happen. And then this company here in Texas said to me, well, look, we see what you're doing. Why don't you come here and do it for us? So here I am in Texas, being the CEO of an algae biotechnology company that I tried to do in Trinidad. So that gives you an example of, what you face sometimes.
Thank you for that, David. I'm sure we could look into that a lot more. It is a significant issue, especially for islands, as we look at the continued pressures on islands and young people as well, and youth. So that's actually a wonderful segue into our next panel, where we look at the policy and technology and research interface. And actually, our first speaker on this panel might actually have quite a lot to say as a leader in some of these things. Let me introduce you to Mr. Pedro Lopez. He is the Secretary of State for Innovation, Technical and Vocational Education and Training with the government of Cabo Verde. He's known for organizing the first TEDx in Cabo Verde. He's the founder of Generation Be Bright. He has previously won the We Are Cabo Verde Best of the Year in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And he also had a number of global accolades. He was in 2018 one of the most influential people in the world of Afro descent, under 40. He has been part of former President Obama's Africa Obama Leaders. He has, in 2018, he was a young world politician of the world, and several other accolades. Currently, in his role as the Secretary of State, he has been working on designing the model for the creation of the Prime Minister's Youth Council in Cabo Verde and an innovation program called Cabo Verde Digital. So with that, let me hand it over to Secretary Lopez.
Thank you, Kalim. I hope that everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Fantastic. Greetings to everyone. First of all, I would like to say congratulations to the organizers, especially to James, a young guy that is organizing such a wonderful event. And we need more young people involved in making the change and creating impact in the world. I always say that this is the time. People are protesting a lot because of several things, but we have to know the system and to be involved on it to bring change. And so congratulations to him and to his team. Also to the University of Delaware and Kalim and Pravesh have been amazing preparing this session. And also my colleagues of the panel, Professor Hosman, Ambassador Excellency Edmonds, Professor Trumbenis, Ms. Trarunk, Ms. Sarah, sorry for not knowing how to say your names right, and also to Professor Raturi. I would like to begin showing where Cape Verde is, and also greeting everyone that is in the session, and being a bit more, English is not my first language, but being a bit more, not very formal. We are discussing things, and I think we need to be as well flexible, and everyone, we should have fun while discussing very serious issues, because from fun comes as well creativity. And when we have creativity, we are more prone to innovation. So we are a small archipelago, a small island developing state. And I'm gonna try to share the screen to show where Cape Verde is. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Fantastic. So Cape Verde is here in the middle of the Atlantic. 4 hours to Portugal, 1 hour to Senegal, 4 hours to Brazil, and 6-7 hours to US. As you see, we are in the middle of the Atlantic. Just quick facts: 500,000, more or less 500,000 inhabitants, 10 islands, 7 airports, 4 of them international airports, and 9 seaports, 2 of them being of deep waters. We are in the continent of Africa, and as you can see, in terms of indexes, normally Cape Verde is on top. We are 3rd in terms of Human Development Index in Africa, UNDP, 3rd in terms of quality of life, Index of Africa, 4th in Africa, Development of Information and Communications Technology, also Freedom of House country category #1, 4th best governance in Africa, ranking 33 in terms of world democracies of the University of Gothenburg. So basically, we have a mature democracy. We never had a war in our country. That's really, really important. And I would like to share with you our vision and long-term objectives of my country. So we have a vision for 2030, and our vision for 2030 is based on 4 points. 1, make Cape Verde a circulatory economy in the mid-Atlantic. 2, sustainable economy and environment development. Number 3, ensuring social inclusion and reduce inequalities through improving education and professional training, health and social safety net, youth and gender equality. And number 4, strengthen democracy, justice, and international diplomacy. How we want to achieve that? Through platforms. We want to be a platform country as well. And for us, the maritime platform is really important, supplying and providing services to freighters, cruise ships, and other vessels. The tourism, of course, the tourism platform that right now we are suffering. Cape Verde is considered by World Bank one of the countries that is suffering more because of COVID-19. Unfortunately, more than 1/3 of our GDP comes from the tourism sector. So it's a challenge, but also an opportunity for our country to diversify our economy. An ICT platform, creating a digital platform for technology and innovation. And also we are betting on energy transition. In terms of energy transition, nowadays we are about 25% of the electricity produced in Cape Verde comes from renewable sources, like solar and wind. And we have a national program for energy sustainability approved 2 years ago. And our goal is to exceed in 2025 more than 50%. And we are taking decisive steps forward achieving the proposed objectives. I think in terms of, I would like to focus as well in terms of our ICT platform, because I'm the person in charge in my country, and I oversee everything that is related with the digital world and also technical training. So I would like to focus a bit on that. In Cape Verde, we are betting on infrastructures. And when I say infrastructures, I reference the submarine cable that we are investing. Will be the Ella Link. It's a state-of-the-art submarine cable that will connect South America and Europe, and will pass through Cape Verde. So we are investing to connect Cape Verde to that cable. It's an investment of $30 million. And our goal is to then sell capability to the rest of countries in Africa. And we already have agreements with countries that are interested in buying capability. And that's a big investment for a small country. We also have a very important data center here, one of the most important of the West Africa, with several levels of security. And now we are investing on a tech park here in Santiago and another island in São Vicente. These tech parks are really important for us, and we want to create a place here where we can design the future. So Cape Verde, we want to attract talents from West Africa and also Cape Verdeans that are living abroad. Like I told you, we have 500,000 Cape Verdeans living in Cape Verde, but we have, for example, 1 million Cape Verdeans living in US, and we have many more in many other Cape Verdeans living in Europe. Well, we're spread around the world, but just to give you an example, Creole, that is our dialect, is the 5th most spoken language in Boston, where we have a huge community. So I think we need to capitalize that. It's really important to capitalize our diaspora. I think it's time, and Kalim, you made reference to brain drain. I think it's really, really important for small islands to do a brain game. In countries like Cape Verde, we have a second and third generation of young people that are working great companies. They have an amazing academic record. So I think it's time for them to return, not just when they are retired, but now. So we are also developing a program for bright minds to return to Cabo Verde. And I think this is the time, because political context in the US is not very easy. Also in Europe, things are changing. And I think this generation of millennials, they want to discover the land of their parents and their grandparents. And they are not moved that much for money as previous generations. So I think this is the time to capitalize the importance of our diaspora and to bring them to small islands like Cape Verde. I made a reference to the infrastructure, the tech park, and the submarine cable. I would like as well to make reference to the networks. We are navigating currently in the islands of Cape Verde in 4G, and we are already betting, and we made an agreement with an important company to deliver 5G in Cape Verde, not for commercial purpose, but in the future. Our goal is to use the technology to improve the health sector and also industry sectors. And I think that's how the technology can be important and relevant right now. In terms of human capital, all the secondary schools of Cape Verde have a web lab. A web lab is a container a bit higher than normal, a port container a bit higher than normal with solar panel, where all the kids can learn, all the kids of our secondary school can learn robotics and can learn as well how to code. And I think it's an amazing project, the web lab, because it's not just infrastructure by itself, but all of them are connected. We have a platform. So if you deliver a workshop in one of the web labs, the other one in a different island can also take advantage of it. And it's fantastic. Our school, people that were dropping school, young kids that were dropping school, our rate of dropping school got reduced because of this project. And also now we wanted to take to all the school system of Cape Verde. We want to become the first country in the world to teach coding as a language. It's an ambitious goal, but for a country like Cape Verde, we never have diamonds, we never have oil. We always bet everything on human capital. And also it's a country with severe problems of water scarcity. This week, finally, we had some rain, but we, in the last 3-4 years, barely rain in my country. So it's a challenge, and that's why we want to bet as well in sustainability and innovation connected with sustainability. And in terms of agriculture, we are developing drop-by-drop methods and other methods we are learning with Israel and other countries. But also we want to bring entrepreneurs to Cape Verde to test solutions here. Like I said, say always, if it doesn't harm the people or our environment, come to Cabo Verde, test our solutions. We are small, more flexible. It's very easy to speak with policymakers. It's very easy to speak with people. We are a very, very open country. Religion is not a problem in our country. We never had problems with religion. We never had problems with the color of your skin. It doesn't matter if it's a very, very free country. LGBT rights are protected here. In terms of equality and equity of gender, right now we approved the equity law to have more and more women in politics, involved in politics. So right now we have a rule of 40-60%. So that's also something that shows how progressive is Cape Verde. And besides infrastructure, human capital, also community. Community is really, really important. That's why we created Cabo Verde Digital. I invite everyone here, more than 100 people, fantastic, to visit our website, digital.tv. Everything is in English. So even though Portuguese is the official language and Creole is our dialect, I invite everyone to go to digital.tv to show you, to get to know the things that we are doing here. We are doing amazing things. We just created right now a scholarship to support 100 entrepreneurs and to create 50 tech startups here in the country. It's the first ever entrepreneurship program focused on ICT, and we'll double the number of startups of ICT in 1 year in Cape Verde. We are recently entering the rankings of the private sector in terms of our startups. So we are really, really happy with it. And yeah, this is the things that we are doing here in Cape Verde. I also would like to share with you a small video. Let me see. Because right now everyone is a bit down because of COVID, but I think we need to remain positive, and I think it's important as well to promote a bit of my country for when we return. I don't know if you guys can hear the sound.
No, we're unable to hear the sound, Pedro.
Okay, let me disconnect my...
Yeah, just disconnect your headphones.
The timing that we have, the session will end automatically in 6 minutes. Unfortunately, I'm not able to extend that.
So a lot has changed recently. The cities are eerily quiet, and the schools are empty for the first time. But this weird time won't last forever. Those beaches, that mountain, that town, they're all still there, waiting for you to return. For you to explore. For you to feel. Cabo Verde, like the rest of the world, is taking a short break right now. A moment to catch up and stay safe. She'll be back, and she'll be ready for you to take the adventure of a lifetime.
So I think Secretary Lopez, Pedro, we are going to have to fast pace this because I just received a message from James that unfortunately try to comment from our last two speakers if we can fill that in. Sorry about that. We've gone over a little bit. Apologies for that. But please, everyone can use the chat to talk to Pedro about his the points that he's been making. Thanks a lot, Secretary Lopez. Unfortunately, we're running short. So very quickly, what we want to try to do is get some comment from Professor Raturi on his perspective. He has been working in the Pacific region on renewable energy issues for many, many years. His fingerprint is on literally any renewable energy technology and policy that you can think of in the Pacific region. So as we have a few minutes, just some quick comments, Professor Raturi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Atul.
Okay. So I just want to talk about the Pacific region as such. When we talk about Pacific, we try to put them together, but we must understand that Pacific region is not one country and they come in all shapes and sizes. So not one size fits all. So it is very, very important that we look at the different countries in the limitations in their resources, and then decide the policies and decide the things that we want to do with them. But one thing is very common among all the countries, and that is what we call the energy trilemma. And we find that they're all struggling with excess, they're all struggling with dependence on fossil fuels, and they're all struggling with climate change impacts. So all these things bring together, I think, all the island countries, but especially Pacific Island countries. So this trilemma is what we are struggling with all the time. I just give you an example, and Ambassador Anton was talking about this, the communities. And here, this is an example of Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea sits on the second largest island in the world, 8 million people, but you find that only 10% people are connected to the grid. And almost 60% people, even today, they use kerosene lamps and batteries and small lights for their lighting needs. And what one thing to understand here very clearly is it's not the lack of money. The amount of money they spend for energy, I've given this blurb here. If they use 2 kerosene lamps, they're using about $20 per kilowatt hour. We pay about 10 cents to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's not the lack of money, it is lack of awareness. And this is where I think people who work in this space, who work in energy sector, they should be going and talking to the community. We have to embrace the community. We have to talk to people. We have to make them aware of the kind of things that are available. There's some studies done by ANZ, and it says that if Papua New Guinea moves into the clean power opportunities, they can save about US $5 billion. So there's a lot of opportunities. Only thing is we have to bring in policies. We have to bring in the technologies that already exist. On the other example, I want to quickly give you about Fiji. Now, Fiji is about 80% people are connected to the grid. 50% comes from hydro. But again, with the climate change, with the change in the weather, and the climatic conditions, the hydro goes up and down, and then the fossil fuel kicks in. So we have to bring in renewable energy sources. And solar can play a big part in that. Now, Fiji is trying to bring in, developing its low emission development strategy. And the moment we move into that space, then we're talking about electrification of all the sectors. So you bring in transport, you can see in the second graph, this graph here, the moment transport comes in, the electricity demand goes up. And this is where we'll have to bring in more renewable energy sources. So as we start talking about energy, then the generation part becomes very important. Solar will play a very, very strong part. This is the work we did for the LEDs, and this is a graph from there. You can see the solar energy is going to be very, very important here. So what are the different technologies that we can bring? And we think that rooftop solar is going to play a big role. Floating solar, because the land is always a problem with the small island countries. So floating solar, and especially in the reservoirs, we can use floating solar. And then as we bring in more solar, then the storage would always be a challenge. We can bring in the battery, but pumped hydro is one technology that could play a big role here. And Fiji or some Melanesian countries, they have the geography and they can use pumped hydro. So pumped hydro, rooftop systems, floating solar, pumped hydro, there's some work already done. There's GIS maps available where pumped hydro potential is shown. And we could see that there is potential in Fiji where pumped hydro with solar. And we think that if we bring in all these technologies, we should be able to supply enough renewable energy to look after the scenarios. Quickly on the climate change, everyone has talked about this, the disasters. Every year the cyclones come in, visit these parts of the world, and the countries lose their resources. Like you see when Cyclone Winston came in 2016, 31%. When Cyclone Pam came to Vanuatu, 51% of the GDP was lost, and it's a regular phenomenon. So we have to have the power infrastructure, other infrastructure, which is resilient, which is safe from this. Fiji spent about $10 million just this year fixing the solar home systems, which were destroyed by the previous cyclone. And this is not the end. Every year, the same thing happens. And now the new disaster of COVID-19, and it has impacted the economic downturn. Fiji has lost all its tourism at the moment. So, all these things, which are not unique to Fiji, is happening in all the countries and all the island countries. So all these things have to be kept in mind when we're designing systems. So policies, first thing is energy. What for? What are we going to do with energy? So whenever we talk about SDG 7, we should be making sure that there is a synergy among all the SDGs. When you bring in energy, it should be able to generate income. It should be generate jobs. It should be able to look after the gender equities, all those kind of things. It's very, very important that we look at the holistic picture. At COVID-19, one example at our university, our students are learning remotely. They are in the remote islands, small islands. Sometimes they have the internet connection, but they do not have access to electricity. So again, electricity plus mobile connectivity, these two things go together is very, very important. I think in these kind of situations, we should be looking after. Every country has developed their national commitments, but the implementation part is always a challenge. We have to develop resilient flexibility systems, financing mechanism should be there. Private sector, we have to bring in private sector. We have to have policies. We have to have regulatory framework. Without private sector, I do not think there will be much advancement in bringing in sustainable energy, to the common people. Community engagement is very important. We have to involve the communities. We have to talk to them. We have to find out what are their aspirations with energy access, and then design systems rather than bringing the systems from outside and forcing them to adapt. Gender equality and capacity building is very important. And the universities can play a very big role, very important role in developing materials, devices, collaborative applied research,